Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk with us, Rabbi Lily Solocheck from Adath Yeshurun Synagogue in Rockland, Maine. Hello, Rabbi Solocheck.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Our Parsha is Behaalotcha. That's a difficult name to pronounce. In this Parsha, what we find, it begins with Aaron commanded to raise light in the lamps of the menorah, and the tribe of Levi is initiated into the service in the sanctuary. Then a second Passover is instituted when a group of Jews who were unable to bring the Passover offering because they were ritually impure ask for a remedy. The people of Israel are dissatisfied with their bread from heaven, the manna or the man, and they demand that Moses supply them with meat. Miriam, sister of Moses, speaks negatively of her brother Moses, and she is punished. Moshe then prays for her healing. Here's the first, or actually second pasuk of the parsha. דבר אל אהרון ואמרת אליו בהעלותך את הנרות אל מול פני המנורה יאירו שבעת הנרות. Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you light the lamps, the 7 lamps shall cast their light towards the face of the menorah. So, Rabbi, let me begin with this. We have the issue of the second Passover. That is, people who cannot have their meat on the appropriate date, and then we have the people complaining about not having meat. These are two different things, but we see the people of Israel keep coming back to Moses with complaints, questions, and demands for changes. So where is this coming from?
Where is this? I think sometimes the Israelites in the Torah are the most human characters, that they actually feel sometimes the most relatable as a group. This story of Pesach Sheni, I think, resonated for me, and probably for a lot of people this year in a way that it hasn't before, of being faced with the question of how do I celebrate when I can't celebrate in the traditional way, and what can we postpone a month and come back and celebrate? What do we postpone a year and come back and celebrate? But what this space of even the language of the impurity, right, feels resonant in a way that it hasn't before. And feels funny next to a story of demanding meat, right? Of
Exactly.
saying, like, we're so tired of this manna. And what's strange to me is, the midrashim about the manna is that it tastes like whatever you want it to taste like, and yet it's still not enough, right? That there's something we're still kind of like looking for in our meat. And their answer has always struck me as strange, right? Their complaint isn't just, we don't want manna, but that, when we were in Egypt, we had this shmorg. We had all of this other food to eat. And I don't know if that's true or not, right? I don't know from the Torah if they actually were eating leeks and cucumbers and fish and all of these things, but that's how they're remembering it. And I think there's something very human there, right? That we remember a time that actually never was, that we remember it like a little bit better.
The good old days before the plague.
The good old days.
When we were all happy and never complaining about anything.
Right, the good old days. The good old days, right. But before the pandemic, everything was fine. Now everything is terrible, and we just want to get back to. And I'll say, in America, I think one thing that we've seen because of the pandemic is that it wasn't fine, right? That the pandemic has actually allowed us to really see structural problems within our healthcare system, within our justice system, within our welfare system that were much easier to ignore before the pandemic, right? And so when we're thinking back to this beautiful time that we sort of want to imagine existed before many of us, went into quarantine, or our cities sort of went into lockdown, it's really easy, depending on who you are, right, to remember, like, oh, it was so wonderful. When we start to think about it a little bit more, right, we remember the other part of the story, right, which for the Israelites is you were enslaved, right? And I think for Jews reading this today, to ask ourselves, like, what is the part of the story that if we were readers of this story, we would be asking, what about this, right? And I think that the Israelites' response here feels so human, right? We want to remember it being better than it was, but that pushes us then to not try to make it better now as well.
Right, and maybe there is a similar sense. You already mentioned the Midrashim saying that manna could taste like anything, so obviously they could just ask that it will taste like meat, but they wanted the real thing, which might suggest something about our attempts today to create artificial meat in certain ways.
Absolutely. My wife and I keep kosher, and we eat meat, but only on Shabbat in general. And so sometimes when we try new meat products, right, like new fake meat, they figured out they can make fake meat out of this thing and that thing. We try it and we're like, yeah, it's not meat. Like you can tell it's not meat, but sometimes that's okay, and sometimes your mouth is like, yeah, this is something else nice. So maybe the ancient Israelites, were the first behind the soy meat alternative.
Right. Well, I think the story at the end of our parsha, the one about Moses and Aaron, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, is the one probably that most resonates in this parsha. This is a story that people remember because it concerns something that we keep hearing about in the Torah, and that's the relations between siblings. There's always some tension between brothers or brothers and sisters in the whole of the Torah. So, in what way is this story unique compared to others?
I think one of the ways that it's unique to me is that it focuses more on the sister than usual. Right. In general, the only sister that I'm thinking of is Dinah, and that's a very different kind of story where she's not really an actor in it. She's part of the story, but it's really focusing around the brothers. And this story really focuses on Miriam. And I think even in the way our rabbis build it out even further in Midrash and commentary, focuses on Miriam in a way that we often don't see sisters as part of the stories, right? They're part of the genealogies sometimes, but they're not part of the story.
Right.
And so here we actually really see Miriam as an actor in this story. And I think, right, one of the things that bothers a lot of modern readers and that jumps out is that it says Miriam and Aaron and are speaking about Moses' wife, but then only Miriam is punished. And I see this inclination from our classic commentators and even from some of our modern commentators to really explain, like, well, Miriam was more harsh with her words, or she started this, etc., right? That we really try to find a reason that she's stricken, right? But Aaron isn't. And I just wonder, to throw one more idea in, is like, what if there's actually just what if there's two different standards, right? And we can think about what those might be, but what if we're not all being held accountable in the same way? And what does that look like?
The counter argument would be that there is another story in the Torah in which we see Aaron getting a huge blow by having his two sons killed by God.
Right.
So it's not as if he's immune from punishment. So are you suggesting that on this particular thing of speaking ill of someone, there might be a double standard?
I think there could be. I think that it's not the only way to read the story, but it is one way we could look at the story, and to ask what is that. And the obvious one might be gender, right? But maybe that's not the only one, right? Aaron and Miriam are in different positions of power within the camp, right? So what does it mean he's the high priest, right? Do we need to preserve his purity as the high priest in a different way than Miriam's? And so then just like really teasing apart, what are the differences between these people? And then what are also the differences in the way that we see them interact with Moses, right? We have this very tender story of Miriam and Moses when he's a baby in the Nile. We actually haven't really seen them interact as adults. And we've seen a lot of Moses and Aaron interacting as adults. So I have so many questions about the Miriam-Moses sibling relationship and how it's developed, from where it started to how we get to here in this moment.
What we do know from just the two stories about them is that once she's saving him by watching him from afar on the Nile, and now he's saving her back by praying for her, for her to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's, just payback.
Yeah. And his prayer is also so, I think it's like brevity is actually like it's short and it's powerful, right? And when I translate this, we often sing in my congregation, Debbie Friedman arranged El Na Rafan Allah. I know there are a couple different arrangements of it. When we sing it and I'm translating for people, I'm like, the Na is in there so much because it's just like it's pouring out of him, this like please, right? This please that you can't like ask for enough to save this person. And I think that there's something, because it's so like short and sweet, there's something like extra powerful about it, that it really feels like it's coming straight from his heart. It's not this long poem, it's not this long question. It's just like, this is how we feel when we see someone we love suffering.
Right. As a rabbi, you must know that many of your congregants come to the synagogue and wish to have such short, powerful prayer, and and then to be released.
Exactly. If all the prayers could just be 5 words, we would be done in a few minutes.
Rabbi, thank you so much for your comments, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.